Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of my C++ series. So today we're going to be going over variables in more depth, and we're also going to be going over cin and cout. Let's get started. So last time I went over how to initialize a variable. We have to declare the data type that variable is going to be storing before, right? So we're going to be declaring this variable as an integer, and we're going to assign the name of number. But remember, once you initialize a variable, you can then just leave it like this, right? But we want to assign a value. So let's assign this number to be 0, right? So now let's go over how to reassign that variable. So in C++, you can reassign your variables into whatever value you want, but it has to be of the same data type. So let's see this number here. I can reassign it to be like 500, negative 500, or anything, right? But remember, it has to be of the same data type, so it has to be an integer. So let's talk about incrementing. So in C++, they allow you to reassign it, right? So I'm going to provide you guys with a statement. So as you can see in the statement here, this number variable, right? We're calling whatever number is up here, and we're adding 1 to it. So we're taking 0 right here, plus 1. And then what we're doing here is that once we finish computing this entire statement, so 0 plus 1, which is 1, we then reassign it back to the number variable, right? So now number is equal to 1. You can also do this a different way, right? You can then just have number, and then you can just plus equals. So what this does is that it's a little shortcut. It does the exact same thing as this, but it just plus equals to whatever the number you give it. So what this does is that it takes the current number, which is 1 from up here, right? Because we reassigned it above it, so this is now 1. We add 1 to it, and then we make it equal to whatever we had, right? So this should be 2 now. So let's print it out and let's see. So we use a cout with 2 less thans, and we call it number, and then we have an end line. So we want to make a new line, right? Let's run it and let's see what it does. So as you see here, it prints out 2. The reason it prints out 2 is that we started from 0, we added 1 to it, and then we add another 1 to it. So it's now 2. So now let's go into another way you can do it, another shorthand way. You can then just call the variable itself like this, right? Then you can do plus plus. What plus plus does, it increments up by 1. And then let's see out this number and let's see what happens. We are expecting 3, right? So yeah, we got 3 back. So let's go down to like take away 1, right? So we have a number, and let's take away 1. So we can do a minus minus, and let's print it out. So let's print out this minus minus. So we have 3. So we have 2 from up here. We have 3 from down here. Then we have a 2 from down here, right? So that's decrementing. So now, as you can see right here in my variables, I put a plus plus and a minus minus on the right hand side. But you can also put it on the left hand side too, right? So let's print out a number. But before we print out the number, let's add 1 to it, right? So let's increment it from the left. What this is saying it's going to do is that it's going to add 1 to this number, and then it's going to cout. But if we put the plus plus on the other side, what we're saying here is that we want to print out this number, and then we want to add 1 to it. So let me show you the difference. So let's say it's on the left side. So let's end the statement. Now let's compile and run it, right? So let's cout, and as you can see right here, it's a 3, right? So now let's have it on the other side. Let's have it on the right side. And now let's have an end line. So now let's print it out and let's see what happens. As you can see down here, it's also a 2. So it kept the number from down here. But if we print out this number down below, it should be 3 now. And the reason why is that we're incrementing after we finish this. So while we print it out, here, it hasn't incremented yet. It only increments once this statement has finished. So that's why it's 2 up here, but 3 down here. So now let's talk about cin and taking in numbers. So the way you would take in numbers is that you would use a cin statement, right? But in C++, it doesn't automatically output a message for your users. So you have to do that manually using a cout. So you have to cout a message, so let's say enter in a number, right? And let's talk about cin. So cin is basically the same thing as cout, but instead of using less than signs, you would then use greater than signs, right? And then you have to give it a variable. So you give it a numbers variable or whatever variable that you already assigned. So now let's talk about this. So as you see right here, I didn't do a little end line. The reason I didn't do an end line is because now whenever the user types in their input, it's on the same line as your message. If you were to add an end line right here, and let's run it, and let's see what happens. So now that we ran it, and now as you can see that we add an end line, the input that we're sending in is below the message. So it's not on the same line. So I personally think that looks worse. But that's up to personal preference. You can do it either way, right? So let's input a number and let's hit enter. So cin will automatically output that number, right? So cin will automatically take in that number. So say we want to take in a name, right? So a string. Well, let's put name here. What happens? Well, it gives us an error, right? Because we haven't defined name yet. So we have to go above here and we have to redefine name. So you can't take in what something you can't take in and put it into a variable that doesn't exist. So your variable must be declared above it. So it must be declared before. So now name works, right? So if we do this and we enter in a name, it works, right? Because we already defined the name above it. So we just went a little bit more in depth into variables. There's not much for us to do right now until we get into loops and functions, but for now, it's gonna be it. Thank you guys for watching. Bye bye.